Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Pio D'Emilia. I'm the moderator today. And I welcome our three guests today. The issue we are dealing with today is a very sad, delicate, and important issue, I would say. It's the issue of child abduction, but not only. It's the issue of recognizing the rights of children more in general. An issue that in many countries, especially in the West, is considered a common sense and acquired by all the legal systems, but that here in Japan doesn't seem to be yet recognized. Same thing we would say is about the joint custody, another important issue that, again, in most countries is recognized. Actually, is the most used way to deal with separations and divorces for kids, while in Japan, the custody is usually granted to one parent, basically the father, but also the mother, but also the father in some cases. This, along with other cultural and tradition of Japan, brings to a very, very dramatic data. According with the data that has been given through the Kokai, the Parliament Commission, more than 200,000 kids in Japan do not see a father or a mother anymore. I mean, they are just stranded by one father, which is a violation of the International Children Convention of New York, which states very clearly that kids have the right to grow with a stable relation with both parents. I don't know if I quoted correctly, but the concept is this one. Now, before introducing you our three guests, one of which is almost a habitué of this club. It's already the fourth time you're coming. Let me just make a very simple statement at the beginning. Some people have raised the issue that the foreign press, including us, which we cover foreign press, may give too much attention to the issue of abduction without entering into the reason why one of the parents have left the house, namely DV, domestic violence. Now, we know that in many cases of divorce and separation, the reason behind, not always stated, but sometimes existent anyway, is domestic violence. Now, of course, we are not denying this by any means. We just want to stress once again that we are dealing here with the rights of children and not of a stranded wife or husband. Children have the right to see and grow up with both parents, even if they are criminals or delinquents. This is very clear. For example, in my country, the parent that is in prison has the right to see his children. Okay, so let me introduce the speakers from the middle, Suzuki-san. She's a Japanese mother. It's very important that we have here also a woman, because usually there is a perception that the victim of abductions are only the fathers. She's a Japanese mother, and she will tell us her story. Then we have Kojima Shinji, Japanese father on my right, former rugby player who has been through a very, very sad and dramatic story. He has been even jailed because he wanted to see his kids. And finally, on my close right here, Vincent Fichot, also a French father. He became kind of famous recently because he started a hunger strike in front of the Sendagaya stadium during the Olympics, and because of that, many foreign press and domestic press covered the issue, including his, direct contact with French President Macron. Okay, so I think that Suzuki-san is going to speak first. どうぞ。英語でですね。はい。Okay. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Suzuki, and I'm a mother of 2 children. I have an 11-year-old son and 7-year-old daughter. My children have been kidnapped by their father, and I have not seen them for 1 year and 8 months. I don't know where they are now, even though my husband and I are still married, and I still have custody rights as a parent. I would like to briefly share my story on how I became separated with my children. It began 2 years ago when I was expelled from my family home. I was spending time at my parents' house, and my children were at home with my husband. Then, my husband suddenly announced that I could not see my children unless a third party was present. In the weeks and months that followed, he would call the police if I were to go near our house or try to talk to my children. I was also excluded from my children's kindergarten and school because my husband had told them to not allow me inside. I rented a room near our home but had no direct contact with my children or my husband for more than a year. Then this April, my husband sold our house and disappeared with my children without my consent. It is clear that the move was not the case of relocating due to an emergency. He did not have a rational purpose. He just kidnapped my children and fled. I went to the police to report that my children had been abducted. However, the police would not accept my complaint. I attempted to find their school by requesting an information disclosure from the City Board of Education. This request was rejected for a surprising reason. The board said that my husband and I were in a complex conflict situation and that my interference might cause my children to be unable to attend school. So a mother with a parental custody cannot know which school her children goes to. It is unbelievable. In Japan, once a child has been abducted by one spouse, somehow the other spouse is immediately treated as a criminal and faces discrimination in all situations. Everything is stacked in favor of the kidnapping parent. That means, even though I had parental custody rights, the moment my children were kidnapped, those rights were lost. I even had a family court judge tell me that I could not look at my own child. This is obviously a human rights violation. When I last saw my children, they were both crying because they missed me. My son said he wanted me back home, and my daughter said she couldn't sleep at night without me. Their voices have been completely ignored. It is only natural that children want to spend time with both parents and that they should have the right to do so. Japan ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Children in 1994. Article 9 states that children should not be separated from their parents. Our current system does not comply with this because children can easily be separated from one of their parents. Children's rights are not protected. There are parents who do not understand their children's feelings, who consider children as their property, and who even use their children to inflict harm on the other parent. Sometimes these parents kidnap children, as in my case. We cannot change these people, but we can protect children from them by providing a proper system, which is something that other developed countries have done. I do not blame my husband for his actions because I think he's a victim too. I later found out that he had divorce in his mind. Since I was the one who was mainly looking after the children, kidnapping them was the only way he could win custody if we got divorced. This judicial principle, so-called the principle of continuity, is the reason he kidnapped my children. In other words, it is not a personal issue. It is systemic issue. Court decisions of forcing parents to kidnap children and separate them from their other parents. Therefore, it is clear that Japan is not following the Convention of the Rights of the Children. Since Japan does not take this issue seriously, we need to apply international pressure on the Japanese government. My children lost their mother against their will. It is a child abuse. The current system destroys the happiness that belongs to parents and children. Why torture innocent children? Parental abduction and separation of parent and child must be stopped. Thank you.
Okay, who is for a second? Okay, thank you very much, Suzuki-san. And okay, so please, Kojima Shinji, go ahead. You're the second.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. My name is Shinji Kojima. My son was abducted by my ex-wife's family, the judiciary, the government. I was also criminalized by them for protecting my son, who asked him for help, and was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison and 3 years suspended sentence. The victim is not me. He is my son, who has learned to live with me. On November 18, 2012, my son, who was 2 years and 6 months old then, was abducted for my ex-wife and family's desire for sole legal custody. But the family court allowed my son to meet me only once a month, than on spring, summer, fall, and winter holidays. And every time I would meet my son, he'd ask me for help, saying that helping from mom. The next video I'll show you was taken last August 12, 2013, when his mother and grandmother brought back my son, who met me for the first time in a long time. The court rules the footage as the father is letting a child act, and the father has brainwashed a child. Project image.
いじめちゃダメ。この子をいじめちゃダメだよって抱っこして。
いや、いい子もこんなわけないじゃん。ちょっと待って。ちょっと。じゃあ、そうなんだよ。そうなんだよ。そうなんだよ。そうなんだよ。そうなんだよ。そうだ、抱っこしてあげる。そうだ、抱っこしてあげる。そうだ、泣き止んでないよ。こんなに子供が騒いでるんですよ。また来ればいいの。今度来れるから。また来よう。また来ようね。そう、普通じゃないよ、絶対に。また来ようね。大丈夫だよ、大丈夫だよ。大丈夫だよ。そうだよ。大丈夫だよ。At next visit on September 1st, 2013, I realized that my son was in danger, and so I decided to protect him and did not hand him over to his mother. However, on October 22nd, 2013, Judge of Tokyo Family Court decided that I should hand over my son to his mother at the family court building. On the day of the delivery, I first took my son to the family court building. But when he felt the presence of his mother, he refused to enter the family court building. Then the family court investigator tried to convince and bring my son into the court building using toys, but still he cried so much and kept rejecting to see his mother. so the handling over the day was postponed at the discretion of the investigator himself. However, the subsequent investigator report of the investigator he forged the truth and said that the child did not cry and seemed to cry. It was the father who responded inappropriately and could not bring the child into the family court building. That's why on October 31st, 2013, the judge decided that I should hand over my son to his mother, but I didn't follow this decision. And on May 1st, 2015, a public defender from Yokohama District Court and who was appointed as my son's legal counsel came and interviewed my son at the house where I am and my son lived. I self-recorded the full talk implication for crime prevention and for evidence, but still, son strongly refusing to return to his mother's house. From beginning to end of the interview saying, I want to live here for the rest of my life with father, and often appealed to public defender. In response, the public defender gently told my son, I'll tell the adult in the court on your behalf what I've just heard, but what do you feel? Thank you for today. And the investigation ended. However, the truth was twisted again in the investigation report of the public defender on May 18, 2015. Therefore, the conclusion was that children should live with their mother. So on August 26, 2015, a decision by the court was made and hand over the child to his mother. But still, I didn't follow this decision of live file trial. So early morning of August 31st, 2016, more than a dozen police officers came and broke into our home and slammed me in front of my son. That has been a last farewell between me and my son. Later, at the same time of my arrest, my son, who kept strongly refusing to go to his mother's house, was taken and protected at the Hokubu Child Consultation Center in Yokohama, where he lived for 4 months. Why should an innocent young child have to experience such as this? In Japan, there are 150,000 children a year who have similar experience to my son. I think that only foreign pressure can change this problem. Today, I'm very pleased to share and tell the truth to everyone overseas. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Vincent, it's your turn. We know more or less your story. If you can be brief on that and tell us what is new since last time you came.
Sure. So thanks, Pio, again, for organizing that. This is the fourth time we're doing a press conference on child abduction in Japan, and unfortunately, nothing has changed. So my 2 children were abducted by their Japanese mother 3 years and 2 months ago. I do not know where they are, do not know how they look like. Even the Japanese government is refusing to cooperate with the French authorities, who cannot even confirm whether my children are alive or not. I do have a criminal case ongoing in France for both child abduction and child abuse, and we are waiting to hear from the judge on any time now. But I was told that the Japanese would not respect the ruling in France. So what I would like to say today is that first, we're not fighting for the rights of the left-behind parents. We're fighting for the rights of the children. The second message is that child abduction is child abuse, and that it's a criminal offense. As a matter of fact, Justice Minister Kamikawa mentioned on April 13, 2021 in the Senate that based on the Supreme Court precedent, the kidnapping of minors by persons with parental authorities also constitutes a criminal offense. However, I've been to the police 4 times and I've never been able to register a complaint. The issue in Japan is not the law itself, because there's a criminal code. Japan ratified the Convention on the on the right of the child. It's the rule of law. The rule of law does not exist in Japan, and that's really the issue. So since we last met, Pio, while I did a hunger strike, we did have a press conference, and I've learned a few things. The first one is that we mentioned 150,000 to 200,000 children losing contact or being kidnapped by Japanese parents every year. It was not until I did a hunger strike that I realized the extent of the issue, despite learning that number. Every day, I had dozens and dozens of parents who came to testify of their pain, of their experience, like Suzuki-san and Kojima-san today. But I also had children who came. Actually, I remember a day where I had a teenage young girl who was in high school who came and started crying to tell me that she had not heard from her dad. She had not been able to see her dad in years, and that she felt like she was really missing something in her life. We've also learned that child abduction is not always happening by mothers. Mothers are also the victim. We can see, we heard Suzuki-san's story today. On the 8th of the hunger strike, a group of 20 moms from 5 different countries came to express their support, and they were all victims of child abduction. So it shows, this is not a gender issue. This is really a society issue, a systematic issue that has been caused by the political elites doing nothing about the fact that the rule of law is not respected in Japan, and that now we're in a system where it's really the first one who kidnaps who gets all the right, and it creates an environment of fear where either mothers or fathers are afraid that their partner or their spouse is going to take the first critical step, and as a result, they kidnap the child first to secure custody. This is ridiculous. Japan is the only place where it happens in the world. Parental child abduction happens everywhere in the world. It was not created in Japan. However, in other G20 countries at least, there are frameworks that are built to protect the rights of the child. In Japan, it's actually the total opposite. The framework that is currently in place incentivizes and facilitates the kidnapping of the child. Going back to the fact that mothers are also the victim, I was contacted recently by a British mother, and I met with her on Monday. She has lived in Japan for the last 3 years with her British husband, and they have British children. Everyone in the family is British. They have zero connection with Japan whatsoever. However, earlier this year, she came back home, and she had a letter from her lawyer's husband saying that the children would be with their father going forward, and that she would not have custody anymore. It was a de facto ruling made by the lawyer themselves. And she, in a sense, that's how her children had been kidnapped. This is insane because these people have no connection. They have no, they're not permanent resident of Japan. They have no Japanese passport. And it's so absurd that 3 weeks ago, the British government has passed a law to make the abduction of pets a criminal offense. But that means that their pets, the dogs and cats in the UK, are better protected by the British government than their children are by the Japanese government. This is crazy. Japan is an abducting nation, and funnily, Japan keeps on complaining about the people who have been kidnapped by North Korea. It is a big issue, and this needs to be solved. But how can Japan keep on criticizing a country when they actually apply the same concept at home? The abduction of children is so institutionalized that books have been written about it. So, if you see here on this, there are actually websites. There's the federations of lawyers that are actually on their website, and we have the links here of at least 20 lawyers that are offering premium packages to parents to kidnap children, and for $2,000 to $3,000 extra, they make sure that the visitation rights are not respected. This is publicly published on website, and the Japanese government doesn't do anything. This is an invitation to committing a crime by lawyers in Japan. What is the Japanese Lawyer Association doing about it? If you want to be slightly cheaper, there's this lawyer who actually sells also a program on how to kidnap a child. It's only 30,000 yen, $300, so a lot cheaper than the first option. And he even has written a pro format where you just have to fill the blanks with your children's name. And that's basically a form to send to the judge. And this form will allow you to avoid your children having any interaction with the other parents that you kidnapped the children from. this is online, this is on sale. This is clearly a huge business, and this should not happen. We have the upcoming election for the Prime Minister, and it's interesting to see that all candidates have actually expressed hopes to seek, well, actually 2 out of 4, mentioned that they were hopeful to seek a summit with North Korea on the abduction issue. But it's important that they also seek a summit with European leaders and American leaders and the United Nations to solve the abduction of our children. That's pretty much it for me.
Thank you so much. Did you share this document of the
I'll send
lawyers?
you the link.
Okay, send the link to us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because, okay. Thank you very much, all of you. We are now starting the Q&A session with priority with the colleagues and associates in the room, and then we will go to the online questions. But there is one online question that is actually present, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Ilgin Yorulmaz. I am a reporter for BBC World Turkish and also one of the vice presidents of this club. Thank you for coming here today. I have a question perhaps to each one of you, starting with Kojima-san, and then you can answer in short or in long form. Listening to your son now, seeing it, it makes me wonder, are there any child psychologists or child psychiatrists present in a courtroom or outside the courtroom whose professional advice will be taken into consideration when making decisions on behalf of children? That's my question to Kojima-san. And to Suzuki-san, you described actually very gracefully that your husband is not at fault by abducting or being the first one to abduct, because that's what the system requires. What would you like the legal system to do for you now, immediately, so you can see your children? And Vincent, your expression, I think, says it all, that pets are actually valued more in some countries, perhaps. Did you think about taking up this issue to the United Nations, which we had actually, maybe we are still maybe missing a chance as we speak, because there was a convention recently. But where do you see yourself next? Thank you.
はい、BBC ワールドターキッシュ、そしてこちらの協会の副会長のイルギン・ヨルマズと申します。それぞれのスピーカーに一つずつ質問があります。まず小島さんへの質問なんですけれども、今、この動画を見せていただいたんですけれども、その中で一つ疑問に思ったのが、この仲介ですとか裁判所でこのようなことが判断されるときに、その子どもの心理学など、子どもたちのメンタルヘルス、精神的な状況などを専門とする医者などという方は、その判断するときに関わっているのか、その心理的なことが、子どもたちの心理的な状況がその判断に検討材料として考えられるのかというのが小島さんに対する質問です。そしてその次が鈴木さんへの質問なんですけれども、スピーチの中では、今回はその旦那のせいではなく、このシステムそのもののせいである、その構造的な問題ということだったんですけれども、これからどのような法的なことを求めるのか、どのようなこれから求めることとしてはどのようなことがあるのかというのが2つ目の鈴木さんへの質問です。そしてヴィンセントさんの話には、子どもの権利よりもペットの権利が大事にされているのではないかという話があったんですけれども、このようなことを国連で問題提起などをすることを検討されているのか、次のステップはどのようなことを考えられているのかというのがヴィンセントさんへの質問です。じゃあまず小島さん、鈴木さん、ヴィンセントさんという順番でお願いします。
My son met 3 psychiatrists and medical report to 本当ですか？
どちらでも大丈夫です。
3人の医者から診断書をもらって、裁判所に提出しました。でも、その診断名は、なんだっけな、 診断名が、ごめんなさい、ちょっと診断名を思い出せないんですけど、病名が出て診断書出したんですけども、裁判所はそれは嘘だということで、全く受け付けてもらえませんでした。この3人の精神科医は、日本で有名なトップクラスの児童精神科医の診断書です。
So my son actually had psychological evaluations conducted by 3 different very well-known Japanese child psychologists, and these were submitted to the court within the documentation and so on. I don't remember the exact diagnosis of the psychological illness that they did mention in these evaluations. However, the court did not accept these documents, these evaluations that we supplied from these psychologists, and they said that they were all fabricated.
鈴木さん。
はい。そうです。一番は連れ去られると全然会えなくなってしまって、相手がとにかく納得しないと会えない状況なので、その間に子どもがどんどん相手の言いなりになって洗脳されていってしまうので、とにかく連れ去られた後に会える機会をいただきたいです、子どもと。
So the first thing within the current situation, after the child is abducted by one party, it's not possible for the other parent, the parent who is left behind, to meet the child at all unless it is in the circumstances which are accepted by the party who has abducted the child. And this means that because they are, spending just this time with this one parent, there are cases where they can be brainwashed with this parent or made to believe a certain thing. Therefore, the first thing that I would want to call to is the opportunity to meet with the child even after they have been taken away.
Briefly going back to Kojima-san's question, I also requested a child psychologist to meet with my children. It was refused by the other party, and when I asked the judge, Judge Ogawara Yasushi from the Tokyo Family Court, to explain me the legal basis as to why my children could not meet with child psychologists, since I have the same parental rights as my wife right now, he told me that he refused to answer the question. So this is frankly a big issue, even if the Ministry of Health in Japan stated that child alienation was child abuse. So in terms of action, we actually filed a complaint to the Human Rights Council of the United Nations in August 2019. We were 10 parents, mothers and fathers from 4 different countries, claiming that Japan was grossly violating the rights of the child, using notably the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child that Japan ratified 27 years ago. This is ongoing, so the case has been accepted and is pending. We also, me and an Italian father, who's not here today, we presented in front of the EU Parliament last year, and a resolution was passed asking in those terms the Japanese government to stop kidnapping European children. Unfortunately, the day after, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Motegi-san, organized a press conference denying any wrongdoings in Japan. I met with the French President Macron in June 2019. He spoke to Abe about the issue, about individual cases, including my 2 children. But Abe-san said that there was nothing he could do. Macron met also with Suga when I was doing the hunger strike. They also discussed my case, so I've heard. But it's been over 2.5 months, and I still don't have any proof that my children are alive or not. What you have to know also is that many parents, Japanese parents, are on the FBI wanted list in the US for child abduction, but the Japanese government refuses to cooperate.
Any other question from the floor? Please.
Yes, good morning. My name is Thierry Cancini from AFE. I would like to ask the 3 panelists, why do they think that parental abduction still happen in 2021? Thank you.
AFP の記者です。3人にお伺いしたいんですけれども、なぜまだ2021年にこのような子どもの誘拐、子どもの連れ去りが今でも起きるのでしょうか。
I'll answer if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So first, this is something that was brought up by the chairman of the Committee of Petition in 2020 when we were in Brussels, saying that she was astonished that in 2020 this thing still happened in Japan. I think, as this book, and I have no financial interest in this book, but describes really well, and this is called the Parental Child Abduction Business. There is a lot of there is financial collusion, and to me, the fact that the Japanese political elite in Nagatacho has done nothing about it for the last many years. I mean, the LDP has been in power for the majority of the last 50 years. They've been criticized by the UN, by European leaders, by the European Parliament, by American politicians, and yet they've done nothing about these issues. Shows that there's probably, and I cannot think of any other reasons why they would disregard these warnings and it would continue to violate the rights of the child. I cannot think of any other reasons but financial collusion.
Anybody else wants to answer? You have なぜまだ
やっぱり法の整備の問題が日本は非常に遅れていると思っております。世界で、先進国で、こんだけのことが起こるのっていうのはやっぱり今日本だけだと思ってますんで、その法整備を早くしてもらいたいと考えます。
I think that the reason that this is still persistent or still happening in Japan is because of delays in having the legislation actually in place and being implemented properly. When we compare to the situation in other developed countries, other countries do have laws in place and so on and are implemented to prevent this kind of thing from happening. However, that is not the situation in Japan, which is why it's still continuing on the extent that it is.
私は子どもの権利が軽んじられているのが一番の理由だと思います。子どもが両方の親に会うというのは当たり前の権利なんですけれども、日本ではその認識が全くありません。
For me, I think that it is because in Japan the rights of the children are not fully respected. They are really seen as they are very taken lightly. It is a universal human right for children to be able to have access to meet with both of their parents. However, in Japan, this recognition is not widely held. It's not widely understood.
May I chime in on this issue? Legislation should always follow the progress of society. I come from a country where this issue was very strong until a few years ago. Italy didn't have even the divorce, as you know, for many years. But then it was approved by the legislation, by the parliament, because the society has changed already. Now, my question is, it is true that Japanese legislation is not up to international standards, but is Japanese society ready to accept this? And my question to you, especially you to Japanese, because from a foreigner, I don't think he can educate the Japanese, but from your experience, why don't you start a movement, a grassroots movement, having conferences, having meetings, assemblies, town meetings, explaining what you just said, that children are entitled to their own rights. Because if the society changes, then the legislators will have more stimulus to act upon. Parliamentarians, legislators do not do anything that is not shared by the people.
それに関連する質問なんですけれども、やはり法整備ですとか法律が変わるにはやはり社会の進展、社会が変わることも一つの前提になると思います。例えば私の国イタリアの場合ですと、イタリア数年前では離婚というものは禁止されていたんですけれども、社会的な意識が変わることによってそれで国会も動いたというようなことが、それで子どもの権利などもそれについてついてきたというようなことがあったんですけれども、日本で法整備が確かに遅れているという現実もあると 思うんですけれども、社会の方でもその法整備が変わるなどという準備は社会の方でできているというふうに思いますでしょうか。で、特に小島さん、鈴木さんのお伺いしたいんですけれども、やはり社会が持っている意識などを変えていくということがまた国会を動かしていくということになると思いますので、例えばその子どもの権利などを説明していくための、社会運動といいますか、草の根のレベルでの、集会ですとかセミナーですとか、そのようなことを企画して、それで社会的な共通認識を作って、それで国会の方を動かしていくというようなことを、検討されるので、されることはどうでしょうかという提案と質問です。
今のご質問ですけれども、これに関してやっぱり多くの被害者が同じふうに考えておりまして、もう何年も前から、それこそ何十年も前からいろいろな団体が出来上がって、凱旋活動をしたりですとか、世間に世の中に訴えてはいるんですけれども、これなかなか日本のメディアが全く取り上げないような状況で、やってもその場だけで、もうメディアじゃほとんど取り上げない状況ですので、なんとかそこを取り上げてもらいたいと、今、皆さん、各団体頑張ってるんですけれども、私が感じるには、ちょっとなかなかもうこれ以上やっても、もう何十年もやってきても変わらないんだから、もう本当に海外の外圧に頼って、海外からもう日本に圧力をかけてもらって、そこをもう変えるようにしてもらいたいなっていうのが、私個人的な考えです。
Yes, as in the question, as we've heard, there are so many different victims who are sharing the same experience and who have been in the same kind of circumstance. And for many years, decades even, there have been many different groups, individuals, and organizations who are active on this issue, conducting public appeals, having activities on the streets, meetings, and so on as well. However, no matter how much this is done, one issue is that the Japanese media does not take up this issue at all. It's completely not paid any attention to there. Therefore, it may be appealed to those people who are physically at that gathering, who are at that public appeal and so on, but it does not spread any further than that throughout society, despite these many years and decades of these efforts as well. Therefore, as I'm seeing that it's been very difficult to effect any change within or through this kind of method, that's why I believe that international pressure on Japan coming from other countries is indeed the best option for having real change happening in Japan.
私も小島さんと同じで、このことを知ってもらうために私たち当事者はすごくいろんな活動をしています。いろんな集会もやってますし、凱旋活動もしてますし、議員への陳情なども行ってます。私自身もお母さんでもう10年もずっとそういった活動をしているという方にお会いしたこともあります。ただこの問題がやっぱりメディアで取り上げられない、取り上げられてもそれを潰されて消されてしまうというようなこともあって、なかなか一般の人に行き渡らないんですね。なのでやってないわけじゃないんですけれども、それが届いていないということだと思います。
I share the same opinion as Mr. Kojima. There have been, for those people who are directly affected by this issue, there have been many different efforts which have been carried out over the years, people having public appeals on the streets, having gatherings, appealing to Diet members, submitting petitions to the parliament, and so on. And I've met another mother, for example, who has been conducting these kind of activities for more than 10 years. However, I believe that one of the issues is that even when these different activities are done, first of all, the media in Japan just does not cover this issue at all. Even if it is taken up once, it is very soon after that just suppressed or becomes quiet, erased again after that. So the activities are happening, however, they're not reaching the broader population, and I think that that's the issue. So it's not that things are not being done, but they're not necessarily being able to be having a broader understanding within society yet.
Japan ranks 67th in the World Press Freedom Index. I think it says it all for a member of the G7.
All right. Any other question from the floor? Yes? Go ahead. Please state your name and affiliation if you have one.
Hello, my name is Enrique Gutierrez. I'm a co-founder of Find My Parent. We are an NGO from the United States. We advocate for children's rights globally and give children a safe platform to voice their rights. My question for all three, what can be done to stop the repeated gross violations of human rights on children in Japan?
Sorry, was Find My Children? What's the name of the organization?
Find My Parent.
Find My Parent.
Yeah.
はい、エンリケ・グティエレスと申します。アメリカの NGO Find My Parent というNGO の代表をしております。アメリカで子どもの権利などを保護する活動をしております。で3人にお聞きしたいんですけれども、この日本で行われているこの子どもの人権に対するひどい侵害を止めるためには何ができるんでしょうか。何をすべきでしょうか。
一つは先ほどの話にもつながるんですけれども、なぜこれがメディアと、広がらないのかっていう要因の一つとして、これでお金儲けをしている団体なり弁護士が存在するということなんですよ。で、連れ去られて親権取られます。取られた方は、養育費なりを、相手の子どもと同居の親に払うんですけれども、その約大体3割をその連れ去りを指南する弁護士が取っていくという、そういう実態もありますので、そういうところから潰していかなければ、それでお金儲けをしている弁護士や団体がおりますので、その人たちがやっぱり邪魔するんですよね。でそういうところは潰していかなきゃならないと思っています。
This is connected to what was mentioned before as well. But first of all, one of the reasons when we consider why the media does not talk about this issue and so on, I think that the existence of a business of lawyers and organizations who are profiting off this child abduction is one large reason. We see, for example, in a situation where the parent who has abducted the child and takes custody then receives the child support payments from the other parent. However, about 30% of these payments actually go to the lawyer who was colluding in the abduction there. So unless there is a change in these kind of financial interests of different lawyers and organizations and so on who are profiting from this business and therefore obstructing a resolution of this kind of issue, I think that it's very difficult to change the situation.
でもう一ついいですか。それが子どもが20歳になるまで、その弁護士というのは不労収入で毎月3割ピンハネするお金を得ることができるんですよ。
And that lawyer continues to receive this 30% of the child support payments until the child reaches 20 years old, until they become an adult.
私は、難しいんですけれども、一つ言うならば、子どもの立場に立って考えられる大人を増やすということです。よくあるのが、母親が子どもを連れ去って、夫のことが嫌いだからあんなやつに子どもを会わせないっていうような方がいるんですけれども、それはその方の気持ちであって子どもの気持ちではない。だけれどもそれがまかり通ってしまっていて、あんなやつに会わせるわけないじゃんみたいなのが普通なことになっているので、もっとちゃんと親が大人になって子どものためにやってあげようという認識が必要だと思います。
It is a difficult issue, but one point that I would want to add is we need to increase the number of adults and parents who are able to consider things from the position of the child, from the perspective of the child. In many cases, for example, we hear a mother might take the children and because of their own hatred for their husband, they say, I'm not going to allow my children to meet such a man, or I'm not going to allow them to meet their father. This is their feeling. This is the feeling of the mother or of the parent, not the feeling, not the interest of the child. However, this is something which is very widespread or shared in a widespread way within society here as well. Therefore, unless we're able to have more people who, when they become adults, when they become parents, can think about this in a mature way from the perspective of the child and what is in the child's interest, I think this is one of the things which is needed in order to stop this situation.
I'd like to add to what Kojima-san said. I think he's right that there's clearly financial collusion within lawyers, but that also exists among the judges. The problem is that you have these judges that are ruling against the Japanese law, they're ruling against the international treaties to which Japan is bound to. And then, as Kojima-san said, they collect up to 30% of child alimony for the rest of for up to 20 years. Which is first money that's taken from the children, because that money should be dedicated to the education and the life of our children. But once they do that, after they end their career as judges, they end up working for these law firms that they ruled in favor of. This was very well described in the so-called Matsudo case, where the father, 5 years after his daughter was abducted, managed to get custody in a family court using the friendly parental rule. This was an epoch-making ruling. And when his wife appealed to High Court, helped with 31 lawyers, 3-1, the ruling was overruled, and the judge in the High Court a year later went to work for one of the law firms representing the abducting parent. So, there is a huge financial incentive as well for judges. You also have to know that once the child is abducted, if you're lucky to see your children, so luckier than we are, you would usually see them in a so-called visitation center. And the biggest visitation center in Tokyo and Osaka are both run by ex-family court judges. And in order to see your child, you have to pay up to Ichiman or 15,000 yen per session to be able to see your child in the presence of a third party. So, and these organizations are all private. So we have to, like with any cartel, drug cartels, terrorist cells, you have to cut the financial incentive to make sure that the rights of our children are respected. You really have to cut the funding of those ill-intended lawyers and judges.
Yes. Any other questions from the floor? Go ahead. We still have a few minutes. Okay, then I insist on my question. Let's go deeper into the Japanese society and the tradition. Suzuki-san, how would it be possible in a normal situation in Japan, even in big cities, that for Oshogatsu or for Natsuyazumi, so-called enlarged family get together? In Europe, this is quite common. Divorced people with the new partner decided to share holiday together, or for Christmas. Well, we have Christmas, you have a Shogatsu or whatever. The enlarged Daikazoku system. How is it accepted in modern Japanese society? For example, suppose that in the future with your husband situation is better. Would you have a Shogatsu holiday together with your husband and his new partner?
Well, myself, yes. Because I think I grew up, I spent some time in U.S. when I was growing up, and I have seen those scenes where they gather together when they're separated. And I think it's so natural to do that.
For you, yeah.
For me, but
in Japanese society,
Japan,
it's not so.
Yeah, it's very rare.
I see. Kojima-san?
質問日本語に訳させていただきます。日本の社会的にこれがどういうふうに考えられるのかという質問なんですけれども、例えばヨーロッパ、欧米の場合ですと、離婚された後でもその家族が例えばお祭りの時ですとクリスマスお正月などは離婚した後もその相手とその相手の新しいパートナーと一緒に大家族として一緒にそのような行事などをお祝いするということが欧米ですと今もかなり一般的なやり方としてはあるんですけれども、今の日本の社会ではそのようなやり方は認められるというふうに思いますでしょうか。
私個人的には思っておりまして、元奥さんの方にも子供が生きている以上はずっと2人元夫婦ですけども縁があるんだから、いくら離婚するにしてももう二度と会えなくなるような別れ方はやめろとずっと伝えてはいたんですよ。
そういうことね。
Personally, I would want that kind of a situation as well. I also said to my former wife, as long as we have children together, even if we ourselves are divorced, we are still connected by the fact that we share these children. And so, breaking up after a divorce in a way that you're, not expected or not able to ever meet again, I do not think is natural. And I spoke to my wife about this, but she completely refused this.
Yeah, that's a good point. We in Europe used to say that you divorce an adult person, but you cannot divorce your kids.
やはり離婚するっていうのはその相手であって子どもたちとの離婚ではないということが大事ということです。
Well, in Japan prevails the issue, the concept of, in Japanese you say zekko. No? Right?
しかし日本ですとも絶交っていうふうに別れたらもう終わりっていうことです。
Okay, we have a last question here from online, from Rocky Swift of Reuters. Is there something specific that the diplomatic community could do to promote more attention or action on this issue? I think Vincent is the best. You have a lot of experience with the diplomatic.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. It's a very good one. First of all, the UN is currently working with Japan on trying to solve the issue. The phase we are in the complaint is still very diplomatic for the time being, so that there are discussions happening. That's what the EU resolution's aim was initially, was to really send a message to Japan and to work with Japan to enforce the respect of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. But again, the Japanese authorities dismissed it. And you're in a country where the Japanese government blocks access to citizens of foreign countries on Japanese soil. So we're light years away from being able to have an adult conversation between foreign governments and the Japanese government on the matter. I think the foreign countries have tried the carrot for so many years and it's not working, that now we need to use the stick. And this is why Tommaso, the Italian father, and I are lobbying the European Parliament to request the suspension of the strategic partnership agreement that was ratified between Japan and Europe, for which Article 2 states that this strategic partnership agreement is only valid if both parties respect the rule of law, international treaties, and human rights, which Japan is clearly violating. So this is a tool that the European Union could use and must use against Japan to show that they can no longer accept these violations.
Thank you. There is another related question from Fred Varco. It's very much related. I find that diplomats are useless in circumstances like yours. Can you give us your opinion on how they are and how they should change? Well, don't talk about your ambassador, because he behaved well.
Debatable. I know that Italy is actually doing a great job. Like Ambassador Starace was really fighting for the cause, and we already miss him. Diplomats are diplomats, and it's business first and human rights second. That's the issue. Again, Macron signed on the strategic partnership agreement because when the European Union ratifies the treaties, it has to be voted on by all member states. So he had to veto on that. He signed on that agreement on July 5th. So he signed on an agreement that stipulates clearly that human rights and the rule of law have to be respected by both parties. And after having met with me, after having expressed publicly his disapproval on how Japan treats our children. So, diplomats are business first. And again, I think they've tried really hard, and I think they've given up because there's zero progress on the Japanese side. And the feedback that I hear a lot in Parliament, and I always fight against that, is that you don't want to upset the Japanese because Japanese people hate confrontation, but the Japanese government is using that to its advantage by saying, we are sovereign, don't come and criticize us on our home turf. However, when it comes to human rights violations, the sovereignty does not apply. Human rights are universal, and this is what I'm really trying to push back in Europe. And furthermore, it's absolutely wrong. I've been here 15 years. I know that the Japanese government will try to avoid changes. And so you have to keep on putting pressure until they break. So there's really a misconception of how to deal with Japanese back home.
Does anybody wants to comment on this? You too, or can we finish here? Okay. So thank you very much for your presentation today, and let me wish you good luck, and hopefully see your kids again soon. And as a tool of reconnaissance for your appearing today, we are offering Suzuki-san and Hara-san, Kojima-san, a membership for 1 year to this club. So you can come anytime and have lunch or have drinks when it's possible to have drinks. And to Vincent, we cannot give him a double citizenship because you have already one. So it's just a T-shirt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe.
So thank you very much for today, and thank you.